Ed Saltzman and Monica Brett from on how to fill the climate literacy gap, systems thinking, and this is what we all need to take in our thinking for our campaigns together moving forward.
I'd like to introduce Dr. Edward Saltzberg, PhD, and he's the Managing Director of the Security and Sustainability Forum. And I was very pleased to be on his wonderful webinar a few weeks ago when we were talking about American climate and energy literacy. And also Monica Brett, whose long service is astounding. I think I'd just like to have both of our panelists, maybe starting with Monica, say a little bit about themselves and their work, just to introduce the conversation.
Okay, I'm going to actually let Ed go first because he's going to talk about the pathway to where we got to today.
Okay, and just mention a little context, if you would, please.
Well, thank you, Chip. And well, first of all, I run the Security and Sustainability Forum. We have almost 20,000 followers, and we really are all about climate literacy and climate education. The followers are mainly sustainability professionals from all over the world. So this is my, fourth day here, and I think that after the first day of AREI-AREDAY, I didn't know how I could make it to the fourth day. It was so intense. So it's been an amazing experience, and something happened to me each day that I realized that what I've done in creating this organization is only a small piece of what could be created. And so I thank you, Chip, for inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to participate in all of this, because it's just expanded my vision quite a lot. It's really hard to follow Jeffrey Sachs with that kind of a presentation, but in terms of transformation, every time I hear him talk, I think of something else. So I look at my organization a little differently because of what he said. So let me explain what it is, and I'll tell you what it could be based on what I've learned here. So we convene experts from all over the world in free webinars. We work with great organizations like Arizona State University, who's been working with us for the last 3 years to design and execute webinars on all the great subjects, all the important subjects: renewable energy, resilience and sustainability, the circular economy. We're doing a great series with Klaus on restoring the carbon balance. And our audience, as you can see, is a really important audience. It cuts across governments at all 3 levels. It includes business, it includes academics and nonprofits. And it's a large audience. We can be very influential. We are influential. I get amazing feedback from this audience about how appreciative they are that we're addressing these topics, providing this education, bringing in global experts to really give them the information and tools so they can go back to their organizations and execute. But it's a narrow swatch across the globe. It's people that are already in this business, people that already understand what systems thinking is all about. And in many ways, this systems thinking is really common sense and common knowledge to all of us, but not to many other parts of the world and parts of the sectors. So here's what I learned. First of all, I believe, even though I haven't surveyed the group, that I'm probably dealing with progressives overall. Probably 80% of who I deal with is progressives. And I'm not dealing with the right of center. So Rob Sisson and I from Conserve America talked about expanding this to bring in a more conservative group, and what do those conversations need to be. Working with Monica, which has been an amazing experience because she came to me with the idea of an educational forum based around systems thinking, I realized that I'm only dealing with senior professionals, and we're not dealing with the rest of the population. So what we're now talking about is expanding the following to more of the general public, and how do we do that? So an organization like CARE2 gives us access to a much bigger world population that operates below the sustainability field. So in a lot of ways, we're preaching to the choir, although that choir really is looking for more education. I talked to Steve Conger out here from P4P, who worked with Bucky Fuller, and I said, well, systems thinking is really understood by the scientists. And he stopped me there and he said, well, that's not really true. They're really narrowly focused on their issues. So when I say systems thinking is common sense, but not necessarily common knowledge, really what I mean is that the message and the information has to be consumable by the various sectors. It has to be deployed, and it has to be now deployed rapidly, and that's what I learned from Jeff Sachs today. This has got to be deployed very rapidly. So what we're talking about is changing the way thinking and education is done and understanding is accomplished across vertically from the top of the educational understanding sectors all the way down through the community. So focusing on K through 12 is important, focusing on the workforce is important, which gets us back to what is it we need to do from here to move forward. So with that, let me just move to the next slide and let Monica pick it up, because the vision of what we do really comes from her.
Thank you. So I have been working on the international sustainable development policy world for some time, using my multidisciplinary background, really not thinking about it until one day I was working with a legislator, and with Jeffrey talking about educating legislators, that's what I've been trying to do as well. And this legislator, I said, so what can I do to make you successful? And he said, I need a plain language dictionary of energy terms, because most of my legislators don't understand. So I went to the funder who was funding my work at the time, and I said, what do you think? Can we fund this idea? And they said, we fund policy, not education. And they didn't see the link between education and smart policy. So around this time, two things happened. One is the US Department of Energy decided finally to do an energy literacy framework modeled on the climate literacy one. And so I went in with many educators, and we were able to integrate, and I don't know if any of you have seen this, I don't know if you can see this, integrate the social sciences into this document, including the history of energy, the social, the economic, and the political realms in which these people would have to operate. And then I was offered a grant. Oh, and by the way, this is now in Spanish. We worked really hard to get this into other languages. I was offered a grant through the lens of resilience to take this guide, which was in danger of sitting on a shelf, and bring it into the hands of teachers. And we were working with one elementary school, an at-risk school, and this one great teacher they're on the front line, they know what they need, said, how about using energy as a link throughout the year? So starting with energy in music, energy in language. These kids were asked to do an energy book, go home and translate it into the language of their home. They're at risk, many of them spoke Spanish at home, and translate it. And what a wonderful way to learn English is through translation. So we had a lot of follow-up, and we worked through the school district, which was very bureaucratic, and got many results through this, and the kids at the end were excelling in all subject matters because they saw the link of energy and your body, energy and pollution throughout the year. And then we worked with a high school that decided, after doing the math on saving the school district money by having LED lighting and solar panels, they said, well, what do we do with this information? And I said, let's learn politics. So they went to the school board, they presented their idea, and they said, oh, yes, let's do this. So then we taught them the political world of implementation. Along this time, I was thinking, well, there are three things actually that are preventing us from moving forward. We heard about governance and how our government system is operating. We've heard about funding and the disconnect between how funding is flowing and field work. Most importantly, it comes down to education and looking at the bigger picture. So I wanted a forum, and this is why I went to Ed, because he provides this amazing forum that can provide also data and feedback systems to see what the rest of the world is doing. He introduced me to Chip. This forum, this webinar, had Chip talking about what you're doing with community colleges. It was very diverse. We had the World Bank thinking, what's happening internationally? How do we build capacity? We had a lady named Leslie Tammerman, whose husband runs the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation, and her work on curriculum development in California. Bernie Coultier, who is working on building the workforce of tomorrow on buildings. And we had Dr. Chris Boone, who is the Sustainability Dean of Arizona State University, thinking about where are we going in the academic world. And the results of this webinar were really amazing. Oh, let's go back. Okay, so they're saying that educators urgently need new tools and resources that show the connection between the 3 pillars of sustainable development. Existing climate education groups, who are they? Well, they're basically Carleton College that is in Minnesota. They have an Integrate Forum, and there is the Eco Literacy Center in Berkeley and some others. And even Dan Krieger from his work is looking at this. And that's where he comes in, because companies are needing these graduates who understand these connections. I happen to be based right now in Las Vegas, Nevada. The mega resorts who now have sustainability directors are saying, we need graduates to come in to look at these mega resorts as a living, breathing system. And if they just come in with one specialty, like an engineer, they're not seeing the link between that building and, let's say, health, that building and water, energy use, or even their clients and what their needs are. So what we're looking at now is talking about a plan. We are looking to build a plan to accelerate deployment of systems thinking into climate literacy so that these existing groups can build capacity. They're overwhelmed now. And basically, we're looking for designing a plan and a strategic plan, basically, that would help us to accelerate deployment. And it's really important that these groups and these, and actually the model that we're thinking of is something similar to the Energy Foundation, which, you know, educators bring in money together, and then you can have people parachute into these school districts, meet with the teachers, find out what their needs are, things that they can adapt, using the existing groups out there, helping them with the funding that they need, and bringing that together and using the best of the business world to implement that. But it's urgent because people are needing this now, and it goes on with everything that has been thought of so far.
Great. Well, I just want to say that, in fact, it's perfect that we followed Jeffrey Sachs, in fact, because he was calling for what? A plan. So there's some architecture for a plan here, and I'd like to just talk briefly about a CELI. You'll see down in the logo in the lower portion of the slide. Now that means, that's a program at AREI, it's called the American Climate and Energy Literacy Initiative, and simply put, it's a design to partner industry with community colleges and universities to create curricula, both online and classroom, that adheres to the industry standards such that the student or the candidate comes through the process with a job waiting for them at the other end, focused in climate literacy. That's a very simplistic way of saying that we can use our 1,800 community colleges in the country, which by and large are vocational. A lot of the people come out of there 2 years and they go into the job force. And also interface with the higher institutions, the universities with the 4-year degrees, et cetera, but to have the private sector front load this specifically so that the universities and the community colleges can design the curricula such that they will, in fact, be very likely to hire these successful graduates. And so if we can have a job creation mechanism in clean energy, in based in climate literacy, you know, and also tying into everything that Ed and Monica have just said, I think it could be a really, really powerful mechanism to get our country back on track and to, in fact, do what Mr. Sachs suggested has to be done in order for us to really rein in this craziness of nothing but big money driving the national agenda and try to get back to that America's goals. So Ed, how do we, and Monica, how do you see us moving forward in that direction? You know, coming out of the webinar where we discussed all these issues with the other brilliant people that you brought onto the program that day. And I think Ed's programs reached about how many were on? About 700 people?
Around 700, yeah.
So they went back into their communities, and you can see, I guess, the webinars is still available.
Right, they're all recorded, and if you go up on the Security and Sustainability Forum website, SSF Online is the shorthand, you'll see that webinar, and another 125 that we've developed over the last 7 or 8 years. Chip, I was thinking about the concept of a climate-ready workforce, which is really what you're focusing on, and focusing on community colleges, I think, is the right place to focus. And with Chris Boone, a year or so ago, we ran a webinar on the value of a sustainability education. We call it sustainability leadership, or something along those lines. And one thing that came out of that was that industry really needs to buy into the concept of the value of a sustainability or a climate-ready credential in order for that to validate universities or colleges wanting to put money into developing those kinds of programs. So it's not just one thing that's going to get this to move. You've got a push and a pull, a push from, say, the universities and the community college to develop the curriculum, but you've got to get the pull from business to really value that and put it into their HR programs so that it's part of the hiring credentials overall.
Yeah, that's right. Go ahead, Barbara.
Well, and actually the best lens or vehicle to get in there is through these sustainability directors, because they're already understanding the need for this type of viewpoint and how these people should be educated. And actually, if you're educated through systems thinking, it benefits every single discipline, from medicine to transportation and so on. So it's a win-win situation. And I think everyone agrees that being able to see the bigger picture is really urgently needed. So one way we can do that is through the sustainable development professional groups, and go to them and say, listen, what do you think about doing this? Daniel Krieger mentioned that he wants to get to having accreditation. Well, that's the best way in. And it's always looking for what is the catalyst to get in there. And if these people are craving for it and needing it and understanding it.
Well, it's interesting, Dan just showed back up in Aspen. I know he's working with the city of Aspen and the mayor's new county collaborative with the officials in the state of Colorado. And he showed up in 2010 when I was hired to produce Clean Energy Week in Washington, D.C., and we partnered on that. And now we're talking about working together again, and I think that that's exactly what needs to happen with ACO, the Association of Climate Change Officers, who is a national organization that Dan put together since then that does engage the sustainability officers of the corporation. So if we could come up with a design, perhaps create a partnership. And that's what we're about here, folks. We're about creating the collaborations, the strategic alliances at the AREDAY Summit. That's why it's a speaker summit. We encourage you all to do these kinds of things. But if we could come up with a strategic plan coming out of the AREDAY to execute this, I think that would be really one of the highly desirable outcomes from my perspective.
And we don't need to reinvent the world, reinvent anything at all. It's basically, there are existing models out there that we can use and adapt, and basically finding the right vehicle to accelerate deployment. And I think that that's going to be the most beneficial thing that we can do, using the best of the business world to help us move forward.
It's not that the tools aren't available. It's not, we don't really need to get into tool development. It's really the executive function, I think, that's needed here. It's the strategy, but it's also how do you bring the groups together that already are doing what's necessary in a way that it can be deployed. I was looking at the feedback that we got from the webinar that we did. So we asked questions like, how are you going to use the information that you learned here? What else do you need? And I was amazed that I was getting back information from faculty saying, well, we need help back here. I'm going to bring this information back to my university or back into my community. Because even though they understood right away what we were talking about, that's not the same thing as deploying. And things don't deploy themselves. So that's why I say some sort of an executive function is necessary to see what has to be done across the country, maybe even across the globe, because it's going to be different in different places.
Well, I'm getting excited because, to respond to Jeff's comments that there's, 15 or 5,000 jobs in coal, or there's 25,000 jobs in oil, depending on how you calculate. And I don't know if any of our solar experts are in the world, but the last time I checked, I think there was something like 300,000 jobs just in the solar industry alone that's been growing. Now, how can we have this crazy conversation where the conversation of jobs at the federal level is being propped up by all of this big money, but it's not true, and maybe that's the real fake news that we're hearing about everywhere. I mean, that's really what the fake news is, and that we're being led astray, and we need to get back onto the job creation mechanisms that have made our country great. And in fact, that goes to our theme this year, which is protecting America's greatness. We're already great. Let's get back to work. And let's get back to work doing the things that sustain us and don't just destroy us. And so can we, I'd like to just end the remaining time. We have about 8 minutes left. I'd like to take some questions from the audience, but maybe can we think of a way that we can use what you've created and what you've created, Monica, to come together with the team here at AREI in order to go forward and implement a system that's going to actually create this kind of literacy in our country that is so desperately needed.
Yes, and I think that the most important is having the right metrics and gathering the strategic minds and having a multidisciplinary group that comes together. One of the things that I worked on was the development of a sustainable construction technology degree. And as part of creating jobs, well, when they learned all the technology side, we thought, how about adding politics, fundraising, the business world? So just in case these people wanted to start their own business, and really looking at the whole follow-through of the cycle of what they needed to learn. And I think that, let's do that.
Yeah, well, it certainly takes a team, and there are people involved now. But I think it needs you've got to have I think we need to grab the reins here, get together, and just put it together and do it and get started.
Okay, well, I'm in, so we're in, and so we'll do that. So, is there anybody in the audience that would like to address this issue? This young lady right here.
Hi, I have a question about diversity and inclusion. So how are you thinking about how to expand your content to make sure that it's accessible for a wide variety of people in order to actually make this a movement? Thanks.
Well, that's an interesting question, because one of the things that we decided to do is work with a very diverse school, an at-risk school, and thinking that, for the people in the suburbs who already have all the resources, they have what they need, but if you work at the focus point of a school that is really craving out for resources. So we brought in the private sector, and in fact, when they were learning energy, we brought in energy companies to mentor the students and to bring in resources. They funded an energy library, and one of the young girls, a 5th grade girl, said, "Oh, I'm so excited, I now want to be an energy engineer." So I introduced her to a female scientist who could, and it's all about the follow-through. So it is mission critical that we have a diverse group that feels listened to, feels included, and a part of the solution. So that has to be part of this plan. Thank you.
Let's go to Jolie here, then you, Al.
I was listening to the radio talk show, and the dirty blue-collar workers make $100,000 a year, and the clean blue-collar workers in solar are making under 30. And of course, that goes to the subsidies of $92 billion a year for dirty energy. So we need.
I think those are skewed numbers, but.
Clean blue-collar.
I'm just saying.
Clean blue-collar workers need to make as much as dirty blue-collar workers.
Right. Let me just address that. My good friend Michael Polsky, who is a AREDAY alum and couldn't make it this year, has an enormous company called Invenergy that's the biggest independent wind energy developer in the United States. And I know that he's already doing the ACELI model in terms of training through community colleges technicians in the wind maintenance industry, you know, taking care of the big nacelles and the turbines and so forth. And I think that those starting jobs come in at about 90,000, and they'll go right up to about 120, 30,000. Well, it's in the wind sector, but the wind industry is has been the fastest growing sector of energy in the country for the last 20 years, and has only been surpassed in the last couple of years by solar, which has, of course, been driven by the dropping of cost of the solar panels. And I think that, I'm not sure about what the solar installers are making, but I do know that that there's a lot more opportunity in that sector. Although we are fighting this battle where we're losing our renewable portfolio standards in state by state. There's a real assault, or even trying to tax the solar in certain areas now, and making it very difficult, to grow the jobs. So go ahead, Monica.
I just want to add to that. So in Las Vegas, when I was an adjunct professor, and I had students coming in who were they wanted to become teachers. And they were saying, well, as a way to make money, I'm cocktailing. And they said, I make so much money as a cocktail waitress. Why would I want to make less than that, being with all of the need to go into getting a master's in education, all the expense to be a teacher? And so when you started to then approach them to see the link between being well-educated and what that could in the long term provide you, because you can only be a cocktail waitress so long before your back gives out. And you can only work in a coal mine so long before your health gives out. So it was showing them the links, and that became important. And then, of course, then talking to, once you have a better sense of the whole picture, then innovation follows. So it helped everything.
Well, one last question, and then we're going to try to...
Thank you all. This is a very interesting panel. I'm sorry. One of my board members is a community college activist. She's a sociology professor. She's been there for 30 years. She started a sustainability degree and an organic farming degree, and she has made it very clear to me, educated me about community colleges, and it's a very different population from a four-year college. And they have very different needs, as you pointed out. My point is that there are a lot of places to get this educating and curriculum. I mean, we're a small nonprofit, and we do a lot of educating. And we have a couple of courses that we put out. And so I would ask that when you go around looking for creating curriculum, that it's not limited to academia, and that one of the great ways to get communities involved is to have them create the curriculum and work with them. So where they may not have some of the data and resources, you can provide it to them, and then they figure out how to use it. And it's kind of a paradox that Jeff Sachs was talking about, is we have to get this whole country along these goals, but the way to do it, if you're not just going to sign an online petition, it's all local, it's all on the ground.
And I agree with you. Everybody has to feel that they have a role and can integrate their ideas, and no longer being elitist or arrogant in who follows through on this and who is heard. And even the dishwasher can have the best next new idea. So we need to make sure that everybody had the voice and everyone is involved. And that's why we went to our community and say, what do you need in order to make smart decisions? So
Great. Make it very short, please. We want to stay on time.
Great. I've got 0 seconds, so I'll just do this in about 3 seconds. The climate literacy is more than just the technician part of the workforce. So I think we want to take a look at a climate-ready, climate-literate population, and that means K through 12 schools, and it also means not reinventing the wheel, but finding a way to deploy, get the access to what you're saying, what others, and information that others have, so that it's easily accessible at all levels of the educational hierarchy.
Great. Well, thanks, Ed. Thanks, Monica. We talk about local, regional, national, global, but let's face it, at the end of the day, it's all local.
It's all local, yes.
And we have to make our resilient communities and protect the greatness of this country. So thanks so much to the panelists. And
Thank you.